Whenever I teach students the logarithms chapter in a school setting, I always like to call it the natural disaster chapter because many of the things that we use or that we're familiar with when talking about natural disasters, for example, the Richter scale, which is what measures earthquake intensity. Another one would be the Fujita scale, and you've probably heard of that if you live in a place with tornadoes, like if you've heard of something called an F4 tornado or an F5 tornado. I lived in a place that had a lot of them. Those are based on the Fujita scale. And what that means basically is that the numbers are logarithmic. They're related logarithmically. So for example, an F3 tornado is an F4 tornado, even though it's only one higher than an F3, it really means that it's 10 to the 1 times more intense. It's 10 times as intense. An F5 tornado is 5 is 2 numbers higher than F3. So that means it's 10 to the 2 times. It's 100 times more intense than an F3. And the same thing is true with the Richter scale. Richter scale is named, or it's the scale that's used to measure earthquake intensity. So a 6 magnitude on the Richter scale is 10 times more intense than a 5. It's 100 times more intense than a 4, and it's 1,000 times. It's 10 to the 3 times more intense than a 3. So this is our equation right here. The equation m represents the magnitude on the Richter scale, and x in this equation, it's a log equation. X represents the amplitude of the wave, because the earthquake produces kind of this seismic wave when the tectonic plates are shifting. The amplitude is just basically the height of that wave. So obviously the more intense the earthquake, the more that wave is going to be even higher and higher. It's going to move the earth around it. Move the ground even more intensely. So this says the largest earthquake ever recorded in the United States occurred, I believe, it was on Good Friday in 1964 in a place called Prince William Sound, Alaska. It had a magnitude of 9.2 on the Richter scale, which is unbelievable. I think that's one of the highest ever recorded. The famous earthquake in San Francisco in 1906 almost destroyed the city. That should say destroyed. Spelling was not my best subject in school, as you might be able to tell. Nearly destroyed the city. That had a magnitude of 7.8. And the question is, how many times as intense was the amplitude of the Alaskan earthquake seismic wave compared to the wave produced by the San Francisco earthquake? So let's just calculate each of those. So we'll do the one for Alaska, and we'll do the one for SF, stands for San Francisco. So our equation is m equals the log base 10 of x. And they're telling us for Alaska, the magnitude m is 9.2. So we will find the solution to that equation, and in San Francisco, it was 7.8. So all we have to do now to solve this is change both of these into exponent form. And the pattern, hopefully you remember, is to take this number, raise it to that power, and get that answer. So 10 to the 9.2, that's going to be, we'll put that in a calculator in just a sec, that's going to be the size or the amplitude of the wave for the Alaskan earthquake, and here it's going to be 10 to that number equals that, so 10 to the 7.8 equals x. And then if we want to know what's the comparative intensity, well, if I told you the intensity of something was 80 and the intensity of something else was 8, how many times as intense is 80 versus 8? And you would say it's 10 times as intense, because 80 divided by 8 is 10. So we're basically going to have to divide 10 to the 9.2 over 10 to the 7.8. And we'll put that in the calculator. And here's a way to shortcut this for us. Remember that when you're dividing powers with the same base, like 10 and 10, you have to take these exponents and subtract them. So that's the same as 10 to the 9.2 minus 7.8, and that's 9.2 minus 7.8 is 10 to the 1.4. So let's figure out what that is in the calculator. So when we plug this in, 10 to the 1.4, press enter, and it turns out that the Alaskan earthquake, so the thing about this, the San Francisco earthquake strong enough to almost destroy the city, and the Alaskan earthquake was 25 times as intense, 25.1 times as intense. So it just shows you the power of, or basically what the Richter scale measures in terms of power, comparative power, that just 1 point, in this case 1.4 points on the Richter scale, represents an earthquake that's 25 times as intense seismically on the Richter scale.